So that particular set, I believe, was built for that shot. Because you could really do that with a green screen really easily. However, it's rad. Okay, so we have some less important terms. Now here's where we're going to walk through how the photochemical process actually works compared to the digital process and the workflow. So the negative is the thing you acquire your image on. And in acquiring the image, it's the most important thing in the entire process, because you're going to spend a ton of money on this, and then in the film world you hand it to a PA and they might lose it for a week. Okay? So digital is not really that big a problem. It's still going on a hard drive. What makes this more complicated is that you don't want to damage your negative when you're on a film. So you make an inner positive, which is a print of the film. It's a positive, you can project it. But you want to make one of those because you don't want to damage the negative. So you use the inner positive to make more negatives. Okay? And these negatives are because you don't want to damage your inner positive. Okay? I'm not kidding. This is how we do it. Okay? So this is really important because we're talking about generation loss. Every time you make an analog copy of an analog source, you lose a generation. So before any work begins on a film in the photochemical world, you have a positive that is 4 generations away from your original image. If you get into optical printing and old special effects and matte paintings, you're 10 or 15 generations away. Which is why Blu-rays of these amazing movies in the 60s and 70s come out, and they're like, never looked that good in the movie theater. Because there was no way to print them that way. Digital intermediate. This revolutionized filmmaking. And this happened in the 90s. You could scan film, and you'd have film within 1 generation of quality, and then you could start working on it. It's also self-explanatory. It's digital, so it's a thing that you put in between 2 other digital things. So, benefits of digital. This is a simple chemical workflow. You shoot your negative, you print, you make another negative, then you start making prints to do work on. So you edit with print, you color time on a print, and then you do your post effects. This is what digital workflow is. You shoot on digital, and you work on digital, and that's it. So this is a brief history of epic film sets. If you guys are film nerds, you'll know I've missed a million films. I was just making this up as I went. So, the important ones in here, for me, are basically when there was a sea change. So Intolerance was made by D.W. Griffith. He's a super racist, but he did some cool stuff. What's important about this list is when we get into the late 40s and early 50s, we start dealing with optical mattes, which is where you're printing your matte painting or your special effect into your original negative, and then you're losing quality. So this was the way things were done up until the 90s. What's rad about things like Batman, Blade Runner, is that sets were huge. They were great. 2001 revolutionized front projection and rear projection. No one does these anymore because they were film stuff. You can do it with a computer. When we get into the 2000s, what I found in looking at things is that we stopped making epic sets and we started making epic green screens. Like this week, they released a promo for part 2 of Mockingbird or Mockingjay or whatever, Hunger Games, where they were like, this is the biggest green screen, it's 900 feet. It's like, who cares? It's a green screen. It's 3 stories of green curtain. Like, that's not impressive. So, like, is it? Really? I mean, like, I don't think it is. The impressive part is the bits and bytes after you shot it, right? So this is the idea of these sets. So Intolerance, this is 1913. This is about 100 feet tall. All the little dots are people. That's shot in camera because they want first gen, right? You build a set in order to get quality. So then we'll go, let's say King Kong. That's about 35, 40 feet tall. It's a bunch of people. It's real people in front of a real thing. What's rad about the gate in King Kong is that in order to make Gone with the Wind, they burn it down. It's the same set. They needed the space, so they were like, let's just burn down the King Kong set. We don't need it anymore. So there you go. So when we get to It's a Wonderful Life, how many people know that the entire town is fake and was built for the movie? There you go. 2 guys. They built that town for the movie, and it was pre-purposed for other movies, but it was shot in the summer and dressed to look like winter. I mean, it's an extraordinary achievement, because it looks real, it's believable, verisimilitude. Cleopatra, thank you. Cleopatra was a terrible movie and a bomb. However, massive, beautiful sets. Insane. Like, this is crazy. This is all a set. None of this is effects. That's all people. That's all built. It took years for carpenters to build this stuff, and then it took like a year to get Elizabeth Taylor to show up to make the movie. So, talk about the actual problems around filmmaking. So, film is a battle between constraint and control. Nicholas Meyer made Star Trek II. He had this quote about art thriving on restrictions. And I think this is totally accurate, that the more restrained you are as an artist, or constrained you are, the more creative you have to be in problem solving. So filmmaking, as its essence, is about control. You're trying to control light, you're trying to control weather, you're trying to control your actors, you're trying to control your effects. And everything in the world is trying to keep you from doing that successfully. All right? It's a miracle that films ever get made. So, until the 90s, scope and scale was done by shooting things in camera or with optical effects, but you were still losing generations of quality. I mean, the trick to quality in optical effects is that if you're shooting a 35mm movie, you shoot all your effects in 70mm so it matches when it gets printed down, which is crazy because 70mm cameras are huge. So, we'll move on to green screen and digital effects. They're first gen. They're completely controllable. This is what's attractive about green screen. This is what's attractive about digital, is that as a filmmaker, you can go into an entirely controlled space that's lit beautifully, has a green screen. You're gonna hire some guy in Korea who's gonna put the shit back there when you need it, right? To build that world. And hopefully it'll look right, right? You don't have to choose anything in advance. George Lucas is famous for shooting from every possible angle and then figuring it out in post, instead of actually making a choice. So, let's talk about the unintended consequences. So, when you have unrestricted imagination and limited execution because you are not made of money, you end up with something that it might not be so believable looking. So green screen has become the norm for scope and scale. It's the thing you do to put, like, how many people saw the Hobbit trilogy? Unfortunately. Okay. So, how many of you noticed that in the Hobbit trilogy, there's this beautiful ruined town in the third one? And then, if you look at the gateways, it's like somebody put a painting, because that's where the green screen is. It looks flat as soon as you get past the gateways. And it looks, the lighting doesn't match. I mean, it looks terrible. Like, you should go back, you shouldn't really watch that movie again, but if you want to go back and look at that, you can. And it's weird because the 2001 Lord of the Rings trilogy, those look great, but there were a lot of practical effects in those movies. So here's an example. I'm going to pick on this movie a lot. This is called Lords of Egypt. Anybody see it? Of course not. Oh, you did? I'm sorry. So this is a GIF I made of that. So. Hey, how many, very similitude? Anybody? Okay. So, what's happened is as filmmaking, we're getting into the $90 million, $120 million range of the budget. As we're relying on green screen to bring in scope and scale, we have to work harder as an audience to buy in the first place. And so we end up coming out of movies going, look kind of fake. I don't know. Did that look really? Oh, look kind of fake. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you 2 movies that were made 35 years apart. They're both in the sun. They're both a cast of hundreds, if not thousands. They're both a period piece. And I want you guys to tell me which one looks more real. Okay, Which one looks more real?
The first one.
First one looks more real? You're wrong. So this is my favorite shot. This is Heaven's Gate. And this whole shot actually inspired me actually pitching this talk. My wife didn't care then, and she doesn't care now. But I started talking for about 20 minutes about this shot because it moved me to tears, because I started layering in about the subtext of why the camera was put where it was. What's really important about this shot is that this is a town in Idaho that's 700 people, and it is a historical, the entire city is a historical relic and it's protected. So that building, this building, these buildings are all real. So this production, a year in advance, went to this town, hired the entire town to be extras a year later, put dirt in the roads, built facades. This whole bit here is a facade that's 2 feet deep. And when you see the movie, you can actually see in the background, you can kind of tell, but it's fine. If this camera was put, and actually if you go to Google Maps and you look at this exact shot, there's a freeway going over the top, the train tracks are gone. I'm just going to move on to a slightly different angle. Train tracks are gone. There's that facade's not there. The train station, which is actually off camera to the right, is right in the center. And there's a culvert where there's a river. This is actually a river right here. It's now a little creek that they put concrete around. So this, to me, is where a director has, well, let me put it this way. How many people here have made a decision a year in advance that you're not going to know if it worked, and it's going to cost you $25,000 to $100,000? Anybody? Yeah? How'd that work out for you? Really? You were super brave. So this is Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate was fueled by ego and cocaine. It destroyed United Artists as a studio at the time. It was the most expensive film at the time. It's actually not bad. It is gorgeous in terms of the cinematography. And what most inspired me about this shot is that if you put the camera, if you aim the camera too far right, too far left, too far up, too far down, you break the illusion. So you had to make that choice. You couldn't go back a year later and green screen fix it. You had to make a choice in advance of how awesome your shot was going to be. So let's talk about what I believe is the last great film set. Now some of you, maybe most of you, are going to judge this, okay? And I'm going to tell you right now, you're not wrong about some things, okay? What I will tell you is that at no time did you never not believe that you were on the Titanic. You might have thought the dialogue was terrible, but you don't ever not believe you're on that boat. So let's talk about the Titanic set. Titanic cost $70 million US in 1997, which is 146 Canadian today. The pool that they put the set in was 40 million and 86 million adjusted, which is the equivalent, together, to what the city of Edmonton spends on outsourcing. So it's, in one scale, not a lot of money, in another scale, it's a tremendous amount of money. So, what's important about this is the set of Titanic is unspeakably huge and really impossible to comprehend in mortal terms. So, how high do you think this ceiling is? Probably about 35 feet? Seems reasonable. We can relate to that, right? So, Titanic is 700 feet long and 150 feet high, was 90% the scale of the real boat, and could tip to 4 degrees. We've all been to Commonwealth Stadium? Yeah? Okay, Commonwealth Stadium is 300 feet long, 150 feet high at its highest point. Yeah, big. So when I was like, how do I make this human relatable? How do we make this something that you guys can look at and go, well, yeah, of course I understand how big this boat is. Well, my best measurement is my wife. My wife is 4 inches, 5 feet, 4 inches. So the set of Titanic is 30 times higher and 120 times longer than my wife. Now, It's also twice as long as Commonwealth Stadium. Now this measurement doesn't work without visual aids. So, that's my wife. She was not happy to volunteer at that time. Okay? But she did it. So again, 5'4". So 3 of my wife is about 15 feet, almost 16 feet. Okay? It's about 1 story. So, Commonwealth Stadium with my wife to scale. Okay? But still, this is not relatable enough. So let's talk about 15 while I'm away.
Was that a practical effect?
That's a practical effect. So that's about 80 feet. So this is, the parallax is wrong, the camera's on the ground, so obviously there's more space at the top and the bottom because she's not at ground level. But essentially, that's her against Commonwealth Stadium. So I'm now going to inflict on you some really, really bad Photoshop. Okay? I know this image is terrible, it was low res, I'm sorry, but I would like to present to you the set of Titanic against Commonwealth Stadium. That's the scale, it's just low res. So let's look at this again, my wife against Titanic. So, it is not clear how massive this set is, right? And why it's really easy to believe they're on the Titanic. Because they built the damn Titanic for the movie. Okay, so let's wrap this up. So digital has created an infinite possibility space for telling stories. It's allowed us to do anything we can imagine, and the only thing that we are constrained by is the universal constraints of time and money. There's never enough of either. So what this has resulted in is that we've reduced our verisimilitude because we don't build sets anymore. So we have no constraint but increased control in the digital space. And then we have an audience that's become used to things not looking great, not looking real, looking fake. And they kind of go, when they come out of a movie. They have to work harder to suspend their disbelief. Now, one day, computational power will be so big and labor will be so automated or cheap that it will be possible to actually fake things like sunlight. We're nowhere near there yet, unless you've got like 20 years to do a project. So, authenticity, in my mind, is now found in low and medium budget because they have to build sets, and they have to use locations, and they have to use the sun. They don't have a choice. They can't throw up a green screen that's 900 feet long and 3 stories high, and then make computers do the work. So, thank you. You guys want to talk about that Force Awakens set for a second? Yes. Okay. This is the Force Awakens set. So, they built this for literally like 5 shots. So there is a tremendous amount of stuff that happens down here, and then nothing happens here. There's a shot with Poe that's here. That's just because they had $1 million and infinite time to make that movie. And JJ was like, let's just make everything. So it's also the greatest trick because that movie has over 2,000 digital shots in it, which is more than any of Lucas's films. So they're lying about the whole practicality of The Force Awakens. They just pulled it off really well. Okay.
Okay, what I wanted to go up here and say was, thank you, Robin's wife. That was pretty awesome. Does anyone have any questions? I feel like that's very redundant. People should have luck. Right here.
She volunteered.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
She's sassy, I like it. There was another one back here, yeah.
So you know it's got Bro.
Yeah.
Why did they stop doing movies like that?
You mean all in one shot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Something interesting in the whole shot, like it's more than shot, I get in the filmmaking channel, but even Tarantino's last movie that got nominated for special filming, it wasn't still
Well, okay, so rope is there. A lot of people try to do the all-in-one shot thing. Rope's not all in one shot. Rope's actually a bunch of like 8-minute shots that are blended together by panning through the darkness. Because film canisters were only 8 minutes. It's still really rad that he tried to do a movie that is just all one shot. So digital, go for it. You can make a movie all in one shot if you can stage it right. I think what's important is that cinematography has become almost a transitional art at this point, because if you look at like Fury Road, amazing movie. The cinematographer in that movie was entirely displaced by the guy who was managing the DI, because he had to make sure it didn't clip on the top and the bottom. So with film, you have an opportunity to push the dark and the light as far as possible and still get detail. Digital's getting there, but it's harder. I mean, in terms of Tarantino's last film, shooting on 65mm, that's crazy. I personally think everything should be shot in 65mm and presented digitally. But film breaks. Film gets roughed up. I mean, it's a truly fragile, which ironically is the best way to archive films right now. Everybody ever dropped a hard drive? Yeah, you don't want your film on that. So, however. But yeah, cinematography is just, it's changing, and it's more complicated because it's more tech. Like, there was this wonderful time where cameras got small, mags got bigger, sound got smaller, you didn't have to wire everything, and then 3D and digital, everything's wired back up, so it's harder to move the camera now, you know? And it's in stereo, and it's just complicated. That's
So
it. It's
nostalgic.
harder. I'm super nostalgic for film, right? But it's not, digital is fine. It works.
Is that the answer to the whole presentation?
Digital is fine.
Yuri.
Yuri?
Oh, sorry. Hold off. too many of these.
Is there a director who you consider to be particularly egregious in their use of digital filmmaking, like Zack Snyder, perhaps?
Okay, so Zack Snyder is absolutely, but Zack Snyder, man, okay. Zack Snyder is an incredible visualist, okay? He makes really awesome images, and he can't tell a story to save his life. So that's not the fault of digital, that's the fault of Zack Snyder, okay? I would say Alex Proyas, who did Lords of Egypt, who did The Crow, which is all practical, it's a very good movie. That guy, as soon as digital came around, he lost his damn mind. And that may be because he killed Brandon Lee. I don't know. Okay? But that would change it, you would think, as a filmmaker. You might not want to be doing that anymore, I don't know. But in terms of digital filmmaking, I mean, like, you could go down to the Asylum guys and Sharknado and all that stuff. I mean, that kind of is fun because it's so bad. But when you're watching something that's a professional film that costs $200 million to make and it looks as shitty, no, that's not worth my $20 at the movie theater.
Right here.
If you were going to recommend everybody in this audience go home and watch a movie just for the visual content, what movie would you choose?
Oh, man. Oh, there's so many to choose. I mean, okay. I will answer that by saying, how big is your TV? Because if you have a massive TV or projector, you should be watching Lawrence of Arabia. You should be watching Ben-Hur in Super Panavision. You should be watching Blade Runner. I mean, you should be watching 2001. There's a million awesome movies. Okay, if your TV's not huge, or even if it is, go back and watch stuff from the 20s and the 30s, because that stuff's square. And this is what's crazy. It drives me nuts when I've been in the past buying media in line at Best Buy, and the guys in front of me are like, the movie's square, what's going on? This doesn't make any sense. It's like, that's was shot that way, it's supposed to be square. And then the other guy behind him is like, man, the black bars at the top and the bottom, they're cutting off the image. It's like, the movie was shot that way. It's supposed to be like that. Like, you know, like there's no standard for framing. You can frame in any damn shape you want. I mean, there's like 6 different recognized Academy formats. So yeah, I don't. But in terms of visual, that's my picadillo of mine. But in terms of in terms of pure visuals, one of the most interesting experiences I had is seeing Titanic in 3D, because James Cameron as terrible as he is as a dialogue writer, that guy has changed the way films have been made every single time he's made a film. It's extraordinary. And he's also the only person to dive to the bottom of the ocean in the Mariana Trench. So he's crazy. But Titanic in 3D was like it was shot in 3D. It was amazing. So Titanic's a beautiful movie. It's a beautifully shot movie as well. So yeah, I would go for the classics. Like any David Lean movie, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. If you can get to see the one that's the good transfer, not the bad transfer, great.
Right here.
So, what would you recommend a good film about filmmaking?
Oh man, okay. So you can't find this. You can't find this film unless you go find it on VHS. It's called Visions of Light, and it was from the late '80s. It's like '89 or '91, and it's an interviews with cinematographers, including like Conrad Hall. And it's just like I knew Connie Hall Jr. for a while through a friend of mine, and he shot. He was camera operator on Alien 3 and shot Panic Room. And his dad was crazy. He shot The Godfather 2, where it was like, how dark? No, not Godfather 2. What did he shoot? Conrad Hall was crazy with light. The last one I think he shot was the John Travolta movie about poison water. Did he Perdition? Did you do that? Okay. So he did? Did he die before then?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So he's crazy with light. He does darkness like no one else. He does beautiful light like no one else. Road to Perdition is a gorgeous movie as well. So if you haven't seen that, see that. But yeah, if you can find Visions of Light, find Visions of Light, because that movie is rad. If you want to watch a movie about a train wreck, this is on YouTube. You can watch The Making of Heaven's Gate. It's called Final Cut. It's really cool. It shows you how much cocaine and ego was in it.
Okay, one more question. Right there.
Favorite Stanley Kubrick movie?
Not AI. Man, that movie. Wow. Okay. It's kind of got to be 2001, but Full Metal Jacket's really big on the list too. So, but 2001, in terms of what he did with front projection and rear projection, kind of paved the way for some crazy stuff in terms of effects. So yeah, I mean, Kubrick's a incredibly technical director. He's not a really emotional director. I mean, unless other than Strangelove. So, but yeah, no, I'd have to say 2001. I know, pandering to the masses, but whatever.
Thank you so much, Robin.